There is a road on the outskirts of Sleepy Hollow that no longer appears on any map. It surfaces only on Halloween night. Anyone who drives down that road never returns. Only the stench of gasoline and burnt leather lingers in the wind. They say, if you ever hear an engine rumbling in the dark, don't turn around. Because the driver before you is still sitting behind the wheel. This me. Fog smothered Sleepy Hollow so thick that every light turned to a dull blur. Halloween night was alive with laughter, pale masks, and cheap costumes glowing under street lamps. Yet, among the noise and color, Nolan Graves moved like a shadow. He hadn't come for the festival, but for an old newspaper headline from 1993. 6 cars vanish on an unnamed road, engines still running till morning. 30 years had passed, and the mystery had never been solved. The town tried to forget, but the faint scent of gasoline still clung to the air, as if it had never left. Along the cobblestone streets, people hung pumpkin lanterns and paper ghosts, but behind their windows, Nolan could feel cautious eyes watching. The name Hollow Road was still spoken only in whispers. Inside the town's old library, he sifted through decaying archives. The pages were brittle, the ink fading beneath the weight of time. A 1992 map marked a narrow route leading west into the forest, Hollow Road. On the town's current map, that route had vanished, replaced by a white void, as if it had been carved out with a knife. In the margin of one page, scrawled in pencil, was a note, "Do not turn on the headlights." Outside, a thin drizzle began to fall. Nolan walked back toward his rented room, passing moss-covered houses, where the wind moaned through chimneys like the sighs of something that did not wish to be awakened. At the last intersection, he paused. An old gas station still burned a single trembling yellow light. An elderly man sat beside a rusted pump, his eyes hollow as if they had seen too much. When Nolan approached, the man merely glanced up, saying nothing. Only the rattle of wind through tin and the dull clang of metal echoed between them. Then, from somewhere beyond the edge of sight, Nolan sensed movement. A sound low and distant, like an engine turning over in the dark. It wasn't coming from the main road, but from the forest where the map turned blank. The noise sputtered, lingered, then faded, leaving behind the faint, acrid smell of burnt rubber in the damp air. Back in his room, Nolan opened his laptop and began to type the first line of his article. There are roads that only appear when no one is meant to see them. The cursor blinked, slow, steady, like a pulse. It reflected his weary face, hollow-eyed yet fixed on the darkness beyond the window. The fog was thickening. Somewhere out there, among the moldy hills, an engine was humming again. Steady, rhythmic, like the breath of something that had never stopped. When the clock struck 11:10 p.m., Nolan rose. The map lay open on the desk, a red circle drawn around the western woods, like an eye watching him back. He slipped the recorder into his jacket, locked the door, and stepped into the street. In the distance, the fog swallowed the horizon, as if all of Sleepy Hollow were dissolving into its own nightmare. Ibidi. The room he rented sat above an old tavern, its walls soaked in smoke and mildew. Through the window, Nolan Graves could see the western woods, where the night fog curled like the breath of something waiting to exhale. He sat at the desk, surrounded by flickering lamplight and scattered notes, yellowed articles, torn maps, fragments of local testimony, all forming a distorted mosaic whose center was a single missing road, erased from every official record. He switched on his recorder. His gravelly voice filled the silence, each word sounding less like research notes and more like confession. Years ago, he had written about places that didn't exist, crime scenes that the police refused to acknowledge. But this felt different. Something in Sleepy Hollow was calling him, as though the story hadn't chosen him by chance, but the road itself had summoned him. A small photograph rested on the desk. Martha, his late wife, smiling faintly in a frame smudged with dust. She had died in a car crash 5 years ago, on a rain-slick highway not unlike the one he was about to find. In the trembling light, her face faded, then vanished completely when the lamp flickered. Nolan's eyes lingered there, guilt rising with the whistle of wind through the cracked window. Memories flooded back, the nights she begged him to stop, the mornings he left chasing truths. And now, once again, he was preparing to drive toward what everyone else had learned to avoid. The clock read 11:37. Outside, the last echoes of Halloween faded, leaving only the hush of rain tapping gently on the tin roof. Nolan closed his notebook, checked his camera, flashlight, and the old town map. His phone's GPS showed nothing, a blank screen and a weak signal icon. But when he set it down on the desk, the display suddenly flickered to life. A thin line appeared, faint, trembling, unnamed, leading straight into the western forest. He stared at it as blurry words emerged from the haze. Hollow Road. The recorder on the table clicked on by itself, playing a low, steady rumble, the sound of an idling engine. The same rhythm he'd heard the night before. But there was no tape inside. No reason it should be playing at all. Nolan rose. His pulse raced, yet his eyes were steady. Curiosity had long since drowned out fear. He slipped on his jacket, gathered his gear, and descended the damp staircase. Outside, the wind whipped the fog into ghostly sheets that rolled across the street like a pale shroud spreading over the town. When he turned the key, the engine growled awake. The clock on the dashboard read 11:47 p.m. On the GPS screen, the phantom line glowed. A road with no name, winding deep into the black forest. Nolan drove toward it, unaware that behind him, the light in his rented room kept flickering, as if someone were still sitting there, watching him leave. Oh! The road out of town narrowed, hemmed in by crooked trees draped in wet moss. Nolan Graves drove slowly, tires crunching over gravel slick with rotting leaves. Ahead, the fog was so dense that his headlights became nothing more than two faint yellow orbs in a sea of white. No signs, no streetlights, no GPS signal. Only the steady hum of the engine echoing through a boundless, soundless dark. He gripped the wheel tighter, eyes straining to pierce the haze. Everything seemed to move in slow motion. The clock on the dashboard read 11:58. He blinked. When his eyes opened again, it read 11:12. Another blink, 10:46. A chill climbed his spine like cold electricity. He reset the dashboard clock, but the hands refused to move. Outside, the fog churned, thickening as though the road were devouring its own light. There was nothing now but the engine's rhythm, until, between the silences, came another sound. Another engine, deeper, rougher, somewhere ahead. Nolan slowed, peering through the glass. In the fog, a flicker of red, taillights. Another car. He accelerated, closing the distance to only a few yards. And then, without warning, the lights vanished, dissolved into the air as if they had never been there. He stopped, killed the engine, listened. The fog was absolute silence. When he opened the door, cold moisture filled his lungs, carrying the acrid tang of gasoline and burned rubber. On the road, tire tracks, slick and fresh. But they stopped abruptly a few meters ahead, ending in emptiness. Nolan crouched, fingertips brushing the cold gravel, feeling the presence of someone who had been there only moments before. From the mist, a shape emerged, a rusted, crooked road sign. The letters were nearly gone, buried under grime. He wiped away the filth with his sleeve. In the beam of his flashlight, 2 words appeared: Hollow Road. Beneath them, a single handprint, faint, pressed deep into the dust, as though someone had clawed at the sign before disappearing. The wind rose, pushing the fog into swirling columns that whispered like human voices. Nolan turned back to the car, heart hammering. Every instinct screamed to leave, but something darker inside, something he'd carried for years, urged him onward. He started the engine. The tires rolled forward over wet gravel, each turn groaning like a sigh. For a fleeting moment, the fog thinned, and in that fragile gap, he saw them. Cars, dozens of them, parked on both sides of the road. Engines running, headlights burning, doors open. No drivers, no movement. Only the synchronized hum of machinery, engines droning in perfect rhythm, a mechanical choir, breathing gasoline and despair. Nolan froze, eyes wide, as the fog surged again, swallowing the lights one by one. Only the sound remained, the endless mechanical heartbeat merging with his own. In his trembling hand, the recorder buzzed to life, unprompted. It played back a voice, his own from the night before. There are roads that only appear when no one is meant to see them. The fog closed in from every direction, and for the first time, Nolan wasn't sure if he was still in the night, or trapped inside the memory of someone who had already vanished. Nudie. The night fog had thickened into something like wet cement, swallowing the beams of Nolan Graves' headlights within a few feet. He no longer knew where he was. The road twisted endlessly ahead, stripped of signs, homes, or sound. Only rows of dead trees lined either side, like silent witnesses to an execution long foreseen. His car shuddered intermittently, the engine growling low and uneven. The fuel gauge dropped faster than it should. Nolan glanced at the dashboard. It was past midnight. He decided to stop, stepping out into the cold, letting the damp air stab at his face. The air carried the stench of burnt gasoline, damp metal, and something faintly sweet, like roasted flesh, the smell that had haunted him since the accident he'd covered a decade ago. Something glowed faintly through the haze, headlights. He moved closer. A vintage Chevy Impala sat motionless in the middle of the road, engine idling steadily. The driver's door hung open. The cabin lights flickered, casting a weak yellow pulse across the scratched dashboard. On the passenger seat lay a torn paper map, dot-dot. Nolan picked it up. The roads were drawn by hand, crude and shaky. Across the center, written in smeared ink, "Turn back before the hum stops." He turned toward his own car and froze. Behind him, deeper in the fog, more lights appeared. One pair, then another, then another. Headlights blooming in the mist, aligning like eyes staring straight at him. There was no sound of engines, yet the glow grew harsher, blinding. Squinting, Nolan realized each vehicle was running, but none had a driver. The sound came all at once, engines revving, howling, rising to a deafening roar. The ground trembled beneath his feet. It was as if the road itself had come alive. Nolan stumbled backward, slipping into a ditch of freezing water. From the fog, an old Ford shot past him, missing by inches, empty. Its windshield was opaque with grime, reflecting his own terrified face before vanishing into the white smoke without a trace. He understood then. He was surrounded by them, an entire procession of ghostly cars, engines growling, brakes hissing, accelerators roaring with no one behind the wheels. Each license plate bore a different year: 1993, 2001, 2014. These were the drivers who had entered Hollow Road and never come back. The radio inside Nolan's car suddenly crackled to life. A man's voice whispered, soft and deliberate. "You shouldn't have come here, Nolan." He sprinted back, slammed the door, heart hammering against his ribs. But when he looked into the rearview mirror, his breath caught. Someone was sitting in the back seat, faint, motionless, staring out the window. No face, no movement. Only the blurred outline of a half-burned coat. The engine roared on its own. The speedometer needle began to spin. The radio hissed with a jumble of voices, dozens of them, layered and overlapping, whispering and wailing in static, the sound of every soul trapped on this cursed road. Nolan screamed, yanking the gear shift, but the car refused to obey. The headlights surged to full brightness, blinding white, and in that fleeting flash he saw them ahead. Dozens of driverless cars, perfectly aligned, engines roaring in unison. They were waiting for him. The hollow road screamed like a living machine, its chorus of engines rising to a single monstrous howl, and at its center, Nolan Graves was simply next in line. "Now, ye, and ease in my eyes." The night wind sighed through the trees, like the breath of something that had lingered here too long. The fog hadn't lifted, it only thickened, heavier and colder. Nolan Graves sat behind the wheel, his hands clenched tight. The engine started on its own. He hadn't touched the keys. Its rhythm was steady, not the mechanical hum of a car, but the heartbeat of the road itself, of something alive beneath the black asphalt. On the windshield, the fog gathered into the shape of a hand. It slid down slowly, leaving a trail of frost behind. Nolan froze. He glanced at the passenger seat, empty. But in the rearview mirror, the faceless man sat in the back seat, his head tilted, staring out the window. The road ahead stretched into infinity, no beginning, no end. The headlights of dozens of cars flickered in the mist like candles on a grave. Then the radio crackled. The static shifted. A voice came through, old, distant, familiar. On Halloween night, 1993, 6 drivers vanished. None were ever found. But when police arrived, their engines were still running. It was his own voice, his broadcast from over 30 years ago. Nolan tried to scream, but his throat locked tight, the sound escaping only as a dry rasp. The speedometer began to rise on its own, 20, 40, 70 miles an hour. The car surged forward. Along both sides of the road, the ghostly cars moved in unison, forming a funeral procession of steel, all heading toward the heart of the fog, where even light could not survive. A whisper came, unclear whether from the radio or from inside his head. Every road leads somewhere. The question is, who's driving? The figure in the back seat vanished. But in the front seats of the other cars, faces began to appear, blurred, half-burned, half-faded. Nolan knew them. Every one of them. Victims of the Hollow Road. Names he had once written in his reports, now staring back at him through the mist. His car stopped suddenly. The odometer spun backward. The lights went out. Silence fell, except for the steady hum of an engine still running somewhere in the dark. Me! At dawn, a patrol car discovered a silver sedan parked in the middle of sleepy Hollow Road. The engine was still running. Headlights still on. Doors opened. No driver inside. On the passenger seat lay a weathered leather notebook. The last line, scrawled in trembling handwriting, read, "Turn back before the hum stops." One officer reached in and turned the key. The engine died with a soft sigh. And in that moment, from deep within the fog, they heard another engine start, steady, cold, echoing far beyond sight. The road was empty. But the Hollow Road had never truly stopped. Pierre